Look, I need you to pay attention right now because what happened yesterday on First Take might be the most brutally honest and painfully accurate discussion about the Giants' future that we've seen all this disastrous season. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that Stephen A. Smith and the entire panel basically dissected live on air exactly where this franchise is going to end up in the 2026 draft, while simultaneously debating whether Joe Schoen should keep his job based on how they perform against the worst teams in the NFL during these final 4 weeks. And the way they broke down the draft projections using ESPN's simulations, combined with game-by-game record predictions, had everyone in the studio completely engrossed, because this isn't just about where the Giants are going to select in April. This is about whether this organization has the courage to finally admit that their general manager experiment has been a catastrophic failure, or if they're going to let a couple of meaningless wins against terrible teams at the end of a lost season fool them into thinking progress is being made. Hey, what's up, everyone? 1 second before we dive in. That like button right there? Hit it now. Takes literally 1 second, but makes a massive difference in growing this channel and reaching more fans. Just smash that like real quick. Every like pushes this video further, so do me that favor right now. So First Take opens, and Molly Qerim has this expression on her face like she's about to facilitate one of those uncomfortable conversations where everyone knows the truth is going to hurt, but someone has to say it anyway. And she throws the discussion open by showing this massive ESPN graphic displaying their football power index and all the simulations they've run to project where each team is going to select in the upcoming draft. And there are the Giants sitting in second place if the draft were today, with a 2-11 record. But here's where it gets interesting. According to the thousands upon thousands of simulations ESPN has run, they're projecting the Giants will actually select around 5th overall on average when all is said and done, because inevitably they're going to win at least a couple more games against the absolutely cupcake schedule they have remaining. And Stephen A. immediately jumps on this with that signature intensity that makes First Take so unmissable. He's shouting about how this is exactly the trap the Giants keep falling into year after year, where they let meaningless wins at the end of lost seasons convince them they're closer to being competitive than they actually are. He's pointing out how last year they won that game against the Colts in the final weeks that supposedly built all this culture that was going to carry over into this season. And look where they are now, 2-11, and competing for the first overall pick again. So what's the lesson here? That winning games against bad teams when your season is already over somehow makes your franchise better, despite all the empirical evidence suggesting otherwise. But here's where the First Take discussion became absolutely fascinating. And this is the part that had me completely locked in. They started going game by game through the Giants' remaining schedule, trying to realistically predict how many wins they're going to rack up. And the analysis was brutally honest in ways I think Giants fans need to hear, even if it hurts. Mad Dog Russo, who was on the panel, started breaking down the Week 15 game at home against the Commanders, and his take was that even if Jayden Daniels doesn't play due to injury, Washington still has enough talent and coaching to probably beat these Giants, who have shown a remarkable ability to find ways to lose games they should win. He's pointing out how the Giants have had 10-point leads in 7 different games this season, and their record in those games is 2-5, which is statistically almost impossible to be that consistently bad at closing. Dan Orlovsky then takes over and starts analyzing the Vikings game from an X's and O's matchup perspective, and he makes this really interesting point about how, despite Minnesota only having 4 wins, Brian Flores, who's their defensive coordinator, is one of the best defensive minds in football and will probably design a game plan that makes life absolutely miserable for Jackson Dart, who's still a rookie quarterback trying to figure out how to read NFL defenses and make progressions. But then Orlovsky also acknowledges that the Vikings just aren't a good football team overall, and that the Giants' strengths, however limited they may be, actually match up well against Minnesota's weaknesses. So, he has the Giants winning that game to get to 3 wins on the season, which honestly would be almost a miracle, given how they've played. The Raiders game was where everyone on the First Take panel agreed this is as close to a guaranteed win as you're going to get in professional NFL football, because Las Vegas is without question the worst team in the league right now. Stephen A. made this hilarious comparison, saying, "The Raiders make the Giants' dumpster fire actually look pretty cute by comparison," which is saying something considering how dysfunctional New York has been all season long. Geno Smith has been terrible. Pete Carroll, at his mid-80s, probably needs someone to take away the keys, not just to coaching the team, but to driving a car, because he's just too old to be on an NFL sideline at this point. And the Raiders as an organization are in complete free fall in a way that makes the Giants' situation look manageable by comparison. And then there's the Week 18 game against the Cowboys, which could have massive playoff implications for Dallas, depending on how the rest of their season unfolds. And the panel consensus was that the Giants probably lose that game, because despite the Cowboys not being some dominant super team, they've made some smart additions at the trade deadline, like trading for Quinnen Williams that have significantly upgraded their roster, while the Giants have been basically treading water, trying to stay afloat. So if you do the math with the Giants losing to the Commanders, beating the Vikings, beating the Raiders, and losing to the Cowboys, that gives you a final record of 4-13, which is exactly 1 win better than last year. This is where Stephen A. absolutely exploded, and it was one of those classic First Take moments that's going to be clipped and shared everywhere on social media. He starts screaming about how, if the Giants are allowing their decision on whether to keep Joe Schoen as general manager to be determined by whether they can beat the Vikings and Raiders and Commanders, who all have fewer than 5 wins, then they're fundamentally misunderstanding how to evaluate executive talent in professional sport. He's saying these are literally the worst franchises in all of NFL football, and if you need to see your GM compete against them to decide if he's good enough for the job, then you've already answered your own question. Because well-run teams aren't playing meaningful games against that level of competition at the end of December when they should be preparing for playoffs. Mad Dog jumped in with this brilliant point about the absurdity of culture versus draft position, and how this has become this false dilemma that media and fans debate every year, despite all the evidence suggesting draft position matters significantly more than whatever culture boost you might get from winning meaningless games. He's citing studies showing that the difference in picking 3rd versus 6th in the draft can literally be the difference between getting a franchise-changing player versus settling for a solid starter. And when you're in the Giants' position, where you desperately need elite young talent on cheap rookie contracts, every spot in draft position matters exponentially more than people realize. And he makes this biting point about how Joe Schoen has been on the job for 4 years now, and literally has nothing to show for it except a collection of bad draft picks and failed free agent decisions, and a roster that's objectively worse than when he arrived. Chini Ogwumike, who was on the panel, made this fascinating observation about the psychology of quarterback development, and whether there's really any value in Jackson Dart learning to win during these final 4 weeks, versus just getting as many quality game reps as possible, while accepting that win-loss results this year don't matter. And she argued there's something to be said about a young quarterback experiencing high-pressure game situations, like potentially orchestrating a game-winning drive or executing the 4-minute drill to drain the clock with the game on the line. Those are scenarios you can't replicate in practice, and there's genuine development that happens when you're forced to execute under that pressure, even if your team is terrible, and the season means nothing in terms of postseason. But then, Dan Orlovsky, who has actual experience playing quarterback in the NFL, pushed back, saying that while he understands that argument, the reality is there's not much carryover from Week 18 of one season to Week 1 of the next. especially for a rookie quarterback who's going to have an entire training camp and preseason to prepare for the following year. He's saying the idea that Dart learning to win now somehow makes him a better quarterback in September is mostly magical thinking that's not backed up by data, and that frankly, the Giants would be much better served losing out and securing the highest draft pick possible, which gives them the best chance of adding elite talent in April. What really struck me watching this entire First Take segment was how completely skeptical everyone was about the direction of the Giants franchise and whether this organization has the self-awareness to make the necessary changes that need to be made, starting with firing Joe Schoen no matter what happens in these final 4 games. Stephen A. closed the segment by saying that if John Mara allows a couple of wins against garbage teams to convince him to give Schoen another year, then he deserves every ounce of misery that comes with owning a perpetually mediocre team. And honestly, it's hard to argue with that logic when you look at the complete body of work over the past 4 years.